All right, I know that looking at this section and the number of pages that you have to do, since there's 8 of them, it looks a little daunting, but there's really not a lot to do on these pages. You're doing less on these pages than you have on the other ones, so just bear with me as we go through this. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to solve for rotations. I'll show you a very visual way, and I'll show you a very mathematical way. Doesn't matter which way you go. I have no preference. You go with the way that makes the most sense to you and the one you like the best. So starting off, a rotation is a movement of a figure that involves rotating at 90 degrees about the origin. So we're looking at this kind of idea. Now, the new prime points will be in the quadrant that is the given number of degrees clockwise or counterclockwise from the original figure. So to be clear, clockwise means you're going to be going in this direction. Counterclockwise means you're going to go in this direction. In a rotation, the original shape will not change size or shape. All it's going to do is change locations, just like with translations. But the important thing you've got to know is the quadrants. Now they're going to go in the shape of a C like coordinate. Quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice that it's done in Roman numerals. That's how it will be represented for you. I am not going to be particular. If you happen to write it not in Roman numerals, there are math teachers who are. However, the way you get it from teachers will be written in Roman numerals. Going on to page 19, example 1 says the following is a 90-degree clockwise rotation, meaning that this right here is your pre-image, and we know this because it doesn't have the prime points, and this is your image. We know that because it has the prime points. So it went from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4, which happens to answer down here that the pre-image is in quadrant 1 and the image is in quadrant 4. Now we're asked to list the pre-image points and then the image points. So if we look at point A, we notice that it's over 2 and it's up 2. When we look at A prime, we note that it is over 2, but it went to negative 2, so it went down 2. For point B, we note that B is at 2, 5, but B prime is at 5, negative 2. C is at 7, 2. We went over 7, up 2, whereas C prime is at 2, negative 7. Now, take a look at what happened to the coordinates between the point on the pre-image and then the corresponding point on the image. What jumps out to you? Hopefully you've noticed that the coordinates flipped, and that's easier to see with points B and C because A being 2, 2, it's harder to tell they flipped. But you should also note that the Y coordinates are now negative. Let's try a second example. If you want, pause the video, try it on your own, and then you can come back and watch it to see how you did, or you can do it right along with me. All right, so now let's take a look at example number 2. This is an example of a 90-degree clockwise rotation because we were in quadrant 3. We know that's the pre-image. There's no apostrophes to indicate prime. And we moved up to quadrant 4, where the image was. We know it's the image because it has the prime points. Again, remember that clockwise means you're going to move in this direction, which is the same as moving in that direction, which is the direction we moved in. So let's go ahead and list our points. Point A happens to be at negative 5, negative 6. We went to the left 5 and we went down 6. A prime is at negative 6, 5. B is at negative 1, negative 6. B prime is at negative 6, 1. We went over 6, up 1. Point C is at negative 1, negative 1. C prime is at negative 1, 1. So we're asked to see, what do we notice is happening with the coordinates? Hopefully you've noticed that, once again, the coordinates flipped. And this time, the y coordinate is positive. If you take a look at this one, now notice that the reason it's positive, look what happens when you go from quadrant 3 up to quadrant 4. It makes sense that the y coordinates are going to be positive because we've moved above the x-axis. If you take a look at example 1, we move below the x-axis, and therefore that would make sense that the y coordinates are going to be negative. Now let's take a look at example 3. Please note that this should read, the following is a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation, so the word counter was left off. And we know it's a counterclockwise rotation because the image is located in quadrant 1, or the pre-image is in quadrant 1, and the image is in quadrant 2, so we moved in the opposite direction that a clock moves. So we are asked again to list the coordinates for the pre-image and the image. For point A, it is located at 1, 2, meaning you went over 1 and up 2. A prime is at -2, 1, meaning you went to the left 2 and up 1. Point B is at 1, 5, and B prime is at -5, 1. Point C is at 6, 2, and 6 prime is at -2, 6. So the question is, what do you notice happened with the coordinates between the pre-image and the image? Hopefully you notice that once again the coordinates flipped. And this time the x-coordinate is negative. But this should make sense to us, seeing as how we moved from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2 and we moved left, going over the y-axis. We end up having negative x-coordinates in quadrant 2. Looking at example 4, it says the following is an example, the following is a 90 degrees counterclockwise rotation. So once again, it's a counterclockwise rotation. The pre-image is located in quadrant 3, and the image is located in quadrant 4, meaning we moved the opposite way of a clock to graph the image. We are asked to list the coordinates for pre-image and image. The pre-image, point A, is located at -5, -6. The image is located at A prime is at 6, -5. For point B, it is located at -1, -6. B prime is located at 6, -1. C is located at -1, -1. And C prime is located at 1, -1. So what happened to the coordinates when we moved from the pre-image to the image? It's better to look at points A and B since point C is not quite as obvious. Hopefully you've noticed that the coordinates flipped. And that the x-coordinate is positive. This should make sense, however, when you look at where the pre-image and the image are, moving over the y-axis, you end up in a quadrant in which the x-coordinates are positive. So it makes sense that the x-coordinate would be positive when the coordinates flipped. Now, for example 5, the following is an example of a 180-degree rotation. So when we look at this, the pre-image is located in quadrant 1, while the image is located in quadrant 3. So let's go about listing our coordinates for the image and the pre-image. The pre-image, point A, is located at 2, 2. A prime is located at -2, -2. For B, the point B is located at 2, 5 because we go over 2 and up 5. B prime is located at -2, -5 because you went left 2 and down 5. C is located at 7, 2, and C prime is located at -7, -2. So what happened in between going from the image, or the pre-image, to the image? Hopefully you've noticed that the coordinates didn't flip this time, but what did happen is that both coordinates are negative. Now let's take a look at example 6. Once again, the following is an example of a 180-degree rotation. We are moving from quadrant 3 into quadrant 1. So this time we're going the reverse from what we did on the last one. Point A is located at -5, -6, because you went to the left 5, and then you went down 6. A prime is located at 5, 6, to the right 5 up 6. Point B is located at -1, -6, and B prime is located at 1, 6. C is located at -1, -1, while C prime is located at 1, 1. What happened to the coordinates moving from the pre-image to the image? While the coordinates did not flip, both coordinates are now positive. So now we're going to take a look at the final page for rotations, page 25, in which this pretty much lays out the rules. So the rules for examples 1 and 2, when there is a 90-degree clockwise rotation, examples 1 and 2, you should note that the coordinates will flip, and then the y-coordinate changes signs. And we saw that with example 1 and example 2, where one time it was positive and one time it was negative when it changed. So just using this rule, for the point 2, -6, we know that the points are going to have to flip. And we know that the y-coordinate now needs to be negative. So 2, -6, when it is rotated clockwise 90 degrees, we get -6, -2. And the point 7, -1 would become -1, -7, because the points need to flip and the y-coordinate changes signs. Now what happens when there's a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation? So in this case we're talking examples 3 and 4. You should note that the coordinates will flip, and that the x-coordinate changes signs. So either way, for 90 degrees, the coordinates will flip. So when we take a look again at the point 2, -6, we should note that the coordinates need to flip, and the x-coordinate changes signs, so -6 becomes positive. For 7, -1, the coordinates flip, and the x-coordinate needs to go from -1 to +1, because the x-coordinate is going to change signs. Now to the final one, 180-degree rotation. They will not state if it's clockwise or counterclockwise, because it doesn't matter which way you move, you'll end up in the same quadrant. The rule for a 180-degree rotation is that both coordinates are going to change signs. So in looking at the point 2, -6, +2 becomes -2, and -6 becomes +6. For 7, -1, +7 becomes -7, and -1 becomes +1.